Lauren, are there any bell cow running backs left in the league, and how are fantasy managers supposed to change their strategy as the league continues to move towards more and more committees?
Are there are there really any left? There are a few left, but I mean, I don't know. Hasn't the league kind of been moving this way slowly but surely anyway? I feel like this is something we should have seen coming. Maybe it's not fully here yet, but I'm going to stick with the strategy that I really like anyway, and I'm going to be attacking those guys early when I have those early picks, and I am going to be looking very, very closely at my RB2 earlier rather than later. That's usually how I'm going to approach that whole situation. This is going to be a turning point year, I think, especially after coming off of a pandemic year. Ooh, gross.
Yeah, this year, I mean, it seems like I'm not sure if it's the 17th game that they added into the schedule, but there seem to be no bell cow running backs left in the league. I mean, there's a small handful. So I actually went through and kind of listed them because there was a question that I wanted to dive into a little bit, and I was very intrigued by it. So I kind of put them all in a list, and even some of these guys that I'm going to name have huge question marks around them. Christian McCaffrey, his role is safe. Saquon Barkley, his role is safe. Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott. And that's kind of it. I mean, after that, you've got some guys that are, going to sniff that RB1 territory, but I wouldn't really consider them bell cows. Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, Mike Davis. Those guys all could be in positions where they'll be splitting carries as well. So I agree with you. Yeah, you say that RB2, and you see those RB2s disappear very quickly when you're in a draft. You might take a wide receiver in the second round, hoping that you can get a receiver in the third round, and by the third pick, by the time that comes back around, there are no running backs left. So nope. I am 100% with you that you have to go out and get those guys as early as possible. So let me ask you a question then. When are you looking for your receivers then? When do you think is the best time to do that? Second round, third round, fourth round? Are you waiting a while since you're going after your running backs that early?
Well, be like water. You got to be fluid when you're in your drafts, right? Because you're guaranteed to have some drunk people who are going to be drafting and doing weird stuff. So you don't know what's going to go on with that. But if you want to go a little bit more technical, so the value that you can get for wide receivers is generally better later on in the draft, meaning, wide receiver 2 and 3, or I should say wide receiver 3 and 4 produce way more fantasy points than the running backs 3 and 4. So you can get really, really good value for these guys as they fall down, if they're even falling. But there's a lot more. I just feel like there's a lot more opportunity with wide receivers in the third, fourth round. No, a lot of people want to go for the Travis Kelce's, which I don't necessarily dislike either. That's something that would be really hard to get away from. But if you have a tight end like Travis Kelce, he basically is a wide receiver. So there's different ways that you can approach it. But for me, I do like to see the value for those wide receivers. You can get them pretty late too. I mean, you can get one that you think is going to have the best opportunity, who may have been forgotten about last year, and then target those guys and see if you can grab them in the third, see if who's available in the fourth. But yeah, I'm waiting on wide receiver. Hopefully not too late, because I don't want to be scraping the bottom of the barrel, So it's because you always be fluid for sure. But yeah, I'm waiting a little bit, not like zero wide receiver wait. But I am going to wait a little bit on the wide receiver position so I can load up on some running backs.
I like the "be like water." That's a Bruce Lee quote, if I remember correctly. I like that. So,
from Enter the Dragon?
You said, though, I don't know the exact movie. I've seen the quote before, but it's like I'm not a big Bruce Lee movie guy. But the motivation, the speeches, the quotes, you see that.
Clearly, neither am I. But I do know that one.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a full Bruce Lee movie. Now that I think about it, but something that I did notice, we're talking about these wide receivers, how you want to get your running backs early. Last year, this blew my mind. 50% of last year's wide receiver ones were drafted after the fourth round. And that lists Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen. That's 6 of the top 12 wide receivers were drafted after the fourth round. And then when I'm doing my drafts this year, I'm looking at guys like Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin and Calvin Ridley that, again, are falling to the fourth round that you could build your team around. So I'm with you. I feel like those early rounds, those first 3 rounds, running backs and tight ends are what you should be going for. Lock in that positional scarcity early, because the wide receivers are a lot deeper.
I like that phrase, positional scarcity. That sounds so
Positional
very
scarcity.
scientific. I love it. I am going to adopt that and use it.
All right, I'm happy that I can share that one with you. But another thing that I noticed, and I looked at this as well, and you talked about it. You know, the wide receiver threes, wide receiver fours, they're going to score more than the running backs at that same position. And as a matter of fact, last year, 90.2% of the wide receivers that hit between that 10 and 15 point range, which is kind of what you want from your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. 90.2% of those guys were drafted after the 4th round as well. So you can you can go out and hit early on those receivers if you want your Devontae Adams and your Tyreek Hills and your A.J. Brown. Get them early, but then you got to realize that you're going to be starting guys like, I don't even know. I mean, you're going to be hoping for injuries, and you're going to be starting handcuffs and hoping that, you can get last year's Mike Davis, which sure they could pop up again, but I'd rather just lock it in a little bit earlier. So that's how I'm changing my draft strategy this year. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Not really, but just first of all, don't get drunk when you're at your draft. Okay. Like I know from experience, don't do that. And again, be fluid, be like water, and make sure you follow us because we are going to be talking about these guys that are late or later round value players to not forget about and to keep in the back of your mind when you're going into your draft. So stay tuned to us.
So what we're going to do today is obviously, we mentioned these guys early that you want to go out and grab if you can. But we're also going to talk about a lot of the backfields that are suddenly very crowded now, where it seemed like we might have a little bit of clarity in some of these backfields, San Francisco and Carolina and New York and some of these other places. All of a sudden, free agency, the draft, threw new people in the mix, and now we're sitting here kind of scratching our heads what to make of it. So I don't know anything. You really don't know anything, but we're going to use our knowledge the best that we can to try to talk a little bit about how these backfields could shake out. So anyway, thank you for tuning into episode 3 of Football Guys' newest show, 2 Point Stance. Just want to remind you that we are streaming this live right now to Twitter. And if you want to check the replay later, we upload that to the Football Guys YouTube page at 7 p.m. Eastern time. That's youtube.com/FootballGuysTV. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these backfields just a little bit. And the one right now that really shook up a ton is we thought that Miles Sanders was going to finally get his bell cow role. Not only did the Eagles select Kenneth Gainwell in the draft, but then they went out and they signed Kerryon Johnson just a few days ago. So let's talk about this a little bit. How does Kerryon Johnson and even Kenneth Gainwell, how do they affect Miles Sanders' value heading into the 2021 season?
There's only 2 people that are going to affect Miles Sanders. It's Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts. That's the issue. And I actually wrote a piece about this last year because there was another hullabaloo about how amazing Miles Sanders was going to be in 2020. And I wrote about it and said, it's not going to happen because Doug Peterson is going to make sure that it doesn't happen. That was an RBBC, running back by committee, if there ever was one. And I worry about this because I don't foresee too much of that changing in the offense. There are so many running backs on this team now. In fact, let me just list them off for you real quick. We got Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Kerryon Johnson, Jordan Howard, and the newly acquired Kenneth Gainwell. Plus, there's 8 total. There's a couple guys I didn't even name. Granted, Jordan Howard probably isn't going to do like a whole bunch, but still, the point is there's a lot of running backs in here for a reason. And I believe that that is going to be an integral part of the game plan, especially with a second year, if you will, quarterback coming into play in Jalen Hurts, who also uses his legs. In fact, according to Pro Football Reference, out of 64 total touches for Hurts, he had 63 rush attempts for 354 yards and a touchdown. The quarterback in like 4 game starts. That's a lot of running. So that worries me for any running back who's on the field for the Eagles. And it's one of those situations where I would really want to stay away from. But if Miles Sanders does happen to fall correctly, possibly, I may have to draft him because of exactly what we were talking about. There is semi-volume, there is opportunity, but he also really hasn't stayed on the field as often as we would have liked him to be on the field in order to produce for fantasy. So this one, I don't like it. I would like to target some other players on the Eagles like Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts, like we've been talking about, which you so very stellarly convinced me to keep a closer eye on. But Miles Sanders, I haven't been convinced of Miles Sanders. I don't think I'm going to be convinced this summer either heading into 2021. I'm just not. I know that's not very popular, but I don't care.
And hey, that's fine. And we're not always going to agree. And that's why the show is called 2 Point Stance, because
Oh my God,
this
you
is
love
all
Miles
about
Sanders, don't you?
speculation. Of course I do. I love Miles Sanders. I love Jalen
OMG.
Hurts. So yes, and I'm going to give my spin on this just a little bit. First of all, yes, you know that my love for Jalen Hurts is very apparent. We've talked about that many, many times. And I understand that there's some, concern there that having a rushing quarterback can, take the ability away from the running back. But we just saw this last year with J.K. Dobbins and Lamar Jackson. We saw it the year before with Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram. There are some times where a rushing quarterback can actually open up more opportunity for the running back. Think back to Cam Newton's early years in Carolina, where he had Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams. He was able to support two good running backs while still having a very high rushing floor himself. And then the Eagles, who we're talking about right now, they did it just a few years ago with LaShawn McCoy and Michael Vick. So, I understand the idea that if you have a rushing quarterback, it can hurt the running back's upside. But we saw the best play from Miles Sanders when Jalen Hurts was the starter. So I looked at it, and granted, it was a very, very small sample size. They only started in 3 games together, but over those 3 games, Miles Sanders racked up 46 carries and 13 targets for 310 total scrimmage yards and 3 touchdowns. Extrapolated over a full season, that's almost 1,300 rushing yards and around 400 receiving yards. So that 3-game sample, if you just blow that up over the course of the entire season, would have been good enough to be RB4 in 2020. So I think that a lot of what held Miles Sanders back early in the season was just putrid quarterback play. Carson Wentz was terrible last year. The offensive line really couldn't do much. But I think that the writing is on the wall for Miles Sanders to kind of take over. The one thing that I can't really argue against is what you called out with the injuries. Injuries have plagued him his entire career, and that's something to get, somewhat worried about. But we saw it last year. Dalvin Cook, a guy who was just consistently dealing with injuries, finally put together a healthy season and finishes the RB2 last year. So I've got a little bit of hope in my heart for Miles Sanders. I think that when you look at the guys that are there, he is far and away the most talented. And I think these other guys are going to be annoying, but I think that it's still Miles Sanders' job to lose.
I mean, I do agree. Okay. And the only reason why I can be on the side of a little bit of hope is I did bring up Doug Peterson before. He's no longer their head coach. So Doug Peterson has never had a 1,000-yard rusher on his squad when you started with the Eagles in 2017, and they won a Super Bowl that way. So he wasn't going to abandon that offensive style of play, right? But he's gone. So there is a possibility maybe they could try that out. I find that hard to believe just with all the running backs that are on the roster. Granted, it's still very early. I also find that hard to believe. I don't know if, like we had already said, if he has the sustainability for it. But you do bring up a good point, though. I don't know. I'm still not convinced, though. I'm still not convinced. But maybe throughout the summer. I don't know.
This time of year, there's so much speculation. As camp develops, maybe we'll find out some stories. But if you remember last year, Doug Peterson made that quote where Miles Sanders isn't going to leave the field, and he did, just not by his own esteem. It was injuries that took him off the field. But I think I heard somebody just sum this up so succinctly, the way that Twitter always does, better than I can. And somebody said that Miles Sanders truthers are going to sit here and say that Kerryon Johnson doesn't move his value at all. Miles Sanders haters are saying that Kerryon Johnson kills his value. Realistically, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and we'll find out as the offseason develops.
Speaking of sustainability, Kerryon Johnson's another one, so I don't know how much that changes.
I mean, he's been playing with a knee brace since he was like 21 years old. That is a telltale sign that he is not going to have. Yeah, exactly. So pretty much where we've gotten is no clarity on the Eagles' backfield. Miles Sanders could be great, but it's crowded. So we'll find out, hopefully, as the offseason progresses. But let's switch to another one. Last week, we talked about Najee Harris in Pittsburgh and Travis Etienne in Jacksonville, 2 other crowded backfields. But I want to take a look at how some of these other rookies outside of, Kenneth Gainwell, who was a later pick, how they affect their respective backfields as well. So let's start with Denver. Javonte Williams was just drafted there, and Melvin Gordon, prior to the draft, looked like he was going to be in a very large role, but suddenly it's not so clear anymore. So is Javonte Williams somebody that you're worried about cutting into Melvin Gordon's usage, and how are you treating him heading into 2021?
Yeah, I'm on the fence on this one. And the reason I'm on the fence on this is because I don't think I know Javonte Williams well enough. So that is something I really want to kind of focus on over the summer is Can he actually do that? Like, can he do that? I'm not sure. Are we looking at a situation where it's like a Royce Freeman versus a Philip Lindsay kind of, situation? I'm not convinced that he will, because this is, Melvin Gordon's last year with, the Broncos, perhaps, because he's going to be a free agent, right, after this season. Is that correct? I think so. I believe. If not, tell me on Twitter. Contract. Yeah, tell me on Twitter.
Final year on his contract. He's getting paid $13.5 million this year. He's getting paid a lot of money.
Chump change. So, I mean, obviously, if there's an injury that happens, we never want to wish injury on anybody. I know we kind of talked about this last week too, but he's someone I'm interested in, not only for Dynasty, but if you have a keeper league, for sure, because you can carry him over for a very little cost into the following season. But I also don't mind having him as a really solid insurance policy. So if he is available when my roster is where I want it to be and it looks solid, and there's some guy, I'm like, I want to see what happens with him, I think he's the one that I would target in that backfield, and also depending on what happens with that quarterback situation.
Yeah. I feel like this is one where I kind of go back and forth. Some days I think, Denver has committed, like I already mentioned, the $13.5 million to Melvin Gordon. And part of me thinks that they're just going to want to run him into the ground, as terrible as that sounds. But he's 28 years old. They're paying him a lot of money. He's probably reaching the twilight of his career. And he still has talent. He's not great. He's not incredibly efficient, but he can still get the job done. So part of me thinks that, hey, they're going to get their money's worth, and Melvin Gordon might see 250 touches. Exactly. And then other days, I sit here and I watch tape and highlight on Javonte Williams, and this kid's a freak. He is so good, and he's got the build and he's got the measurables that he can handle a 3-down role. So this is one where I'm not entirely certain about either. But, Melvin Gordon, he's got a history. 3 straight seasons as an RB1, and then even last year, he still finishes the RB13 despite missing time. And that's what I want to focus on, is the despite missing time, because Melvin Gordon has been in the league for 6 years now, and he's only had 2 seasons where he's had a clean bill of health. So I agree with you that I think Javonte Williams, considering how far he's dropping, is absolutely worth picking up in 12-man rosters, because at this point in his career, given his, fragility throughout his career, you can almost just mark it with ink that Melvin Gordon is going to miss some time. And I think Javonte Williams has all of the skill to really step up and be an RB1 in those situations. So yeah, I think that Melvin Gordon, he's obviously going to have the higher ADP, and he's going to have the much safer floor. But you figure if he's healthy, Javonte Williams and him are going to be splitting touches. If he goes down, it's Javonte Williams' role. So I think that Javonte Williams has a much higher ceiling than Melvin Gordon does.
Interesting, because you just talked me into like there will be no Williams that will be on the field. It's going to be all Melvin Gordon, because like you said, they're going to try to just run the wheels off of him because they have one more year, on his contract, and they're paying him a lot of money, and it's kind of like, okay, prove it, let's go. And he can't. I don't know, man. I don't know. I still will take a shot on Williams if the price is right, if you will. But this is actually making me way more interested in Melvin Gordon now than I was before.
Well, I think this is one of the most interesting backfields, because you've got two guys that realistically have the talent to be RB1s. Vic Fangio is their head coach. He likes to run the ball. So I think that if one of these guys hits, they're going to end up being an RB1. I just don't know exactly how it's going to shake out. So right now I'm looking at the value, and Javonte Williams right now is the much, much better value. You already called it out as far as keeper leagues, though. If you've got a league where you can keep it in next year, with Melvin Gordon gone, Javonte Williams, the writing is on the wall for him to take over in 2022 and be an absolute menace. Now, do you want to talk about the one backfield that is just the biggest nightmare of them all? Like, when you talk about committees, I don't think you can get more than this. The 49ers, they just went out and drafted 2 running backs, Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. And it's not like they're just coming in there to be a 2-headed monster. They are joining a backfield with Rocky Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., JaMychal Hasty, and Wayne Gallman. Just 2 weeks ago, we talked about Wayne Gallman added to the team, and we were saying, hey, he could be a pretty good fix. Then they went out and got 2 rookies, and they have a 6-man rotation. So is there going to be any of these guys that you can rely on in fantasy, or is it going to be like last year where it's week to week a different guy every single time?
I like Mostert because of his explosive playability. I just really like him. I like watching him play. So I don't know, if I have a chance to pick up Mostert and it's not going to cost me anything, you know what I mean. If it's worth it, I might take a shot on Raheem Mostert. But you know what I'll likely do is I'll create a dartboard and I will have all of their names and then I'm going to spin it. And as it's spinning, I'm going to take a dart and I'm going to throw it. And then I'm going to see which name it lands on and be like, I'm starting him this week. Like that's basically what Kyle Shanahan does to fantasy managers when it comes to the backfield.
Yeah. And I think that there's this misconception because like they aren't your typical, RBBC, running back by committee, as we've been talking about. It's not like all 6 of these guys are going to be getting touches on any given week. It's like every week, Kyle Shanahan picks a new guy that's going to be the lead back for that week. We saw it last year with Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., JaMychal Hasty. They all had their weeks where they were great. What I'm looking at this year, though, is first of all, the age and the contracts. So after this season, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., Wayne Gallman, all of their contracts expire. So JaMychal Hasty is still young. Obviously, Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell, the 2 guys that they just drafted, are also very young. So I think that what they're doing is prepping for these veterans to leave next year and kind of bringing up the new guys. So I think that to start the season, we'll see exactly what we saw last year. It'll be Raheem Mostert's job to lose. He's going to get the lead back duties right off the bat. But we've seen Mostert get injured almost every single year now. He's now 29 years old. He's got the big play ability, but I think that we're going to start seeing these younger guys start to work their way into the rotation a little bit heavier and a little bit heavier as the season goes on. So when I'm looking at a pure talent perspective out of all of these guys, Trey Sermon is my favorite. And I think that the 49ers were really sold on him as well, because not only did they use a 3rd-round pick on him, but they actually traded up to get him, which shows how good they feel about him. Now, speaking of football guys, Matt Waldman is a guy that I respect probably more than anybody when it comes to rookies. He does the rookie scouting portfolio, which I feel like I'm just doing a free plug for him here right now, but I do it on my shows all the time. It's one of the best things you can get. I mean, he just blocks off all outside noise, doesn't watch any TV, radio, or anything. He just grinds film for months on end and puts together these amazing rookie portfolios. And he was way higher on Trey Sermon than the majority. And, if he felt that way, and then I also see John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, who's, I really respect them in their evaluation process as well. They all felt the same way about Trey Sermon. So I think that he's
it's going to be like a Trey Mitchell.
Trey Mitchell. That's pretty much what it is. But yeah, I think that Trey Sermon, as the season goes on, he might take over as the lead back. But the biggest thing, like we talked about, is Mostert just gets hurt all the time. And now there's some rumblings that Mostert might even get cut in camp, might be a camp casualty, which would be crazy to see and shake this up even more. So again, let's say you're drafting and you kind of know how ADP is shaking out right now. Raheem Mostert is the highest guy. Trey Sermon slightly below him. Then you've got a pretty big fall off to Jeff Wilson Jr. and then Elijah Mitchell. Which one of these guys would you be most interested in drafting in 2021?
Kyle Juszczyk. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I think, oh gosh, I don't know. I can't quit Mostert. I don't know. And by the way, this is one of the most annoying questions to have to deal with as a fantasy analyst doing starts and sits every season is this kind of question. So I don't know. Yep. I'm going to not commit, and I'm saying I don't know, but I am bringing up Kyle Juszczyk's name to not forget about him because he's also involved and he also got a huge contract. So there's
he
that.
did. And
another name added to the mix.
I don't think you have the run game if you don't have Kyle Juszczyk there. I mean, what he does for that team, it's just he's so much fun to watch and just such an underrated piece of that offense. So let's go. We're going to switch gears and talk about the Jets a little bit now. Not nearly as fun to talk about, but Michael Carter was hyped up by a lot of experts, ended up going to the Jets in the 4th round. And now they just, like all of the teams that we're discussing today, just have this hodgepodge of running backs. Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, LaMichael Pirine, and now Michael Carter in the mix. So are any of these guys worth drafting, or are you just avoiding this backfield as well?
Where was Robert Saleh before he went to New York?
San Francisco. That's why we did this bridge right here. Very good transition, right?
So weird. So we don't really know much about Robert Saleh when it comes to the offensive side of the football because he was their defensive coordinator. We know that he's an amazing dude. Everybody loves him, but that doesn't help us in fantasy trying to figure out where he's going to be plugging players, how they're going to be utilized. So what I'm going to fall back on is you came from a quintessential RBBC complete. So, I mean, when we say RBBC, we mean there's not going to be one bell cow like a Derrick Henry who's going to be taking it over week in and week out. There could be one guy 1 week, and then good luck because you pick him up off waivers and then he doesn't do anything the following week. This may be an exact same situation. So I am, again, using their 49ers and the Jets right now are like in the same category of what I want to do with their running backs, which is stay away. Again, if one of them does fall late enough where I'm like, you know what, I'll take a shot. Or if maybe there's something in the gameplay after week 1 or 2 that we can kind of see, maybe snag one off the waiver wire if I can get that. So the only one I'm staying completely away from is Tevin Coleman. Don't even bother with Tevin Coleman, in my opinion. Stay away from him. But other than that, again, no. I just, nope.
So I feel like you and I have so many like conflicting opinions, but Lauren, I agree with you.
2 point
so much.
stance.
No, and this one, I don't even know what a 1 point stance is. I guess we're a flamingo on this topic.
United stance. Like my shirt. And my
exactly. I couldn't agree with you more on this one. This is a team that I'm just like not that excited about. And you talked about the new coach, Robert Saleh, who came from San Francisco, and their new offensive coordinator is Mike LaFleur, brother of Matt LaFleur, who did that extremely frustrating Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones split for the last 2 years that nobody could make any sense of.
I forgot about that too.
Yeah. So this is one that I am avoiding. And it's like, I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets are one of those teams just putting up like 12 to 14 points every single week. And we see this every single year where these bad teams, they always have 1 or 2 guys that ends up being fantasy relevant. Last year, the Jaguars were abysmal, and James Robinson still was able to finish as an RB1, but he had the odds stacked against him. And then while he was doing his thing, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, all these other extremely talented players that had a lot of draft capital tied to him ended up just completely flaming out last year. So sure, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 fantasy relevant players that pop up on this team, but I don't know who it's going to be. Is it going to be Jamison Crowder, Corey Davis, Zach Wilson, Michael Carter, LaMichael Pirine? Maybe this is the year Chris Herndon finally breaks out and becomes fantasy relevant. I mean, nobody really knows, and it's just they're not a team that
he
really
was fantasy relevant in his rookie year. Chris Herndon was fantasy relevant in his rookie year. In fact, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have like a little fish tank behind me. I should bust that out and plug it in for next week. But I have 3 fishies in there. They're mechanical. They're not real. His name is Chris Herndon. They're all named after tight ends. Irrelevant.
I love that. Who are some of the other tight ends while we're on the topic?
Let's see. The other one is David Njoku and Chris Herndon, and then Hunter Henry is the third one.
So I'm guessing you got this in 2016.
I did.
Or, sorry, 2017 was that the year you got the fish tank? Yeah.
It was 2017. It was a while ago,
yeah.
but yeah, it was. You know. My husband was a tight end when he played football, so I happen to like the tight end position. I'm a little partial to it. So, oh well.
David Njoku, that man will still haunt my nightmares. I thought that he was just going to be the guy. I was so excited about him coming out of college, and it just never, ever worked out. Now, we've got another committee to talk about here. Like, they just don't end. I feel like we could literally talk about almost every single team. And this one, I feel like there might be a little bit more clarity in this one, but let's talk about it anyway and get your take on it. The Patriots, they had some question marks regarding Damien Harris and Sony Michel and who was going to take over as the lead back. That seemed to be, just the 2 of them who was going to be, because James White is just kind of locked into that third down role and he's not going to do anything else. So for early down
he's their pass catching back too.
Exactly. And that's what you expect from James White. But for the early down roles, the goal line work, is it going to be Damien Harris or is it going to be Sony Michel? And then they went out and got Ramondre Stevenson as well. So now, just like every other backfield, we've got 4 running backs here in New England, and they are a run-first team. So I think whoever the lead back is going to be very fantasy relevant. But who do you expect to be the guy here? How do you expect this backfield to shake out in New England?
I am going to pivot completely from when we originally talked about this. Give me Damien Harris or bust. I love Damien Harris. However, I'm not going to reach for him. So if I can get him appropriately in the draft at the right spot, get him at the appropriate spot, I think would be the correct way of saying that. I will go all day for Damien Harris. I really like him. I think he showed some exceptional fortitude dealing with the situation last year. I do worry about how much Cam Newton's legs are going to be cutting into the running back's volume because he doesn't have an arm that's very accurate anymore. Yes, I'm sorry. That was very generic and a little bit cutting, but hey, this is that's my stance. That's my other point, whatever. You know what I mean? So I do like Damian Harris though. He is someone I'll keep my eye on, and he's someone that I think has proven more. And I don't have any facts back that up except the eyeball test. So Sonny Michel, I'm out on. Damian Harris, yes. James White, sure, a flyer if I'm in a PPR league or whatever. I mean, in 2019, he had 123 targets. Was it 2018 or 2019? Can't remember. He had like 123 targets and like 93 receptions. That's crazy. I don't know if he repeated that. I don't know if he can repeat that. So Damian Harris, gimme.
I think we just made history on this show. We have 2 questions in a row that you and I agree on. Do the confetti cannon.
This was not planned. Confetti sprinkles. This was not planned, folks. Like, we literally just talked about this, and I was like, I want nobody. But then as I was thinking, I was like, I think I want Damian Harris. Never mind. My bad.
Damian Harris, he looked pretty darn good last year, and he dealt with injuries. Sonny Michel dealt with injuries. So I looked at this yesterday, and this blew my mind. Through 16 games, Damian Harris and Sonny Michel were only active together for 2 of them. Only 2 games. Out of the whole 16, the 2 of them only were healthy over 2 games. And over those 2 games, Damian Harris had 27 carries for 130 yards. Sonny Michel had 17 carries for 57 yards. So not only did Damian Harris get the volume, but he was more efficient with the volume. And that's exactly what you want to see. I agree with you. It's really tough when you see a running back on a run-first team that has first-round draft capital tied to him. Obviously, I'm talking about Sonny Michel. But if you haven't written Sonny Michel off as a bust by now, I don't know what you're waiting for, because it just has not worked out for him. It's been injuries. It's been, just a slew of problems. But Damian Harris looks to be the best guy in this backfield right now. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I don't have too much to add to what you already said.
Yeah.
James White, he's a great guy. If you want to target him as a late round flex option, he's going to offer you a safe floor because of that PPR. So James White has his role carved out. But I think Damian Harris is a guy that can really take over on a run first team with 2 great run blocking tight ends. And even Cam Newton has been known to get out there and throw some shoulders as a lead blocker. So I'm really excited about Damian Harris this year. I think that he was held back just slightly because of injuries last year, wasn't really able to get up to speed. But he's somebody that I am okay reaching for. I've been pulling the trigger on him in the 5th and 6th round. That. And I think that as we get closer to the season, his value is going to start to rise. But right now, he's going in like the 6th and 7th round of drafts, which I think is just completely disrespectful. And that's a guy that I'd be more than happy to plug in as a week-to-week RB2. So, yes, twice in a row.
Could you imagine?
We agreed.
Drafting I know. Could you imagine drafting I don't know, let's say Saquon Barkley or something, and then it comes around, you can if you know where he could possibly land, and then you snag I don't know, Michael Thomas or something like that. AJ Brown, and then you go and get Damian Harris in the 3rd round. Oh, this is exciting. I love fantasy football. Yay.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Big fan of him this year. So now we've got to talk about the final committee that we'll talk about. And this one's probably a little bit clearer. And I'm going to try my best not to show any bias here whatsoever for anybody that's watching this on video and not audio. It's very clear, given my setup, that I am a Bears fan. But let's go ahead and talk about Khalil Herbert. Yes. Let's go ahead and talk about Khalil Herbert. And this is the last rookie running back we're going to talk about, I promise. He dropped all the way to the 6th round for the Chicago Bears, and they drafted him. We've got Tariq Cohen coming back from injury. Damian Williams was signed as a free agent. So now we've suddenly got what last year it was David Montgomery and only David Montgomery. It was David Montgomery and then maybe 2 touches a game going to Cordell Patterson. But now it's David Montgomery, and that really wasn't anything that was affecting his fantasy value. But now it's David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, Damian Williams, Khalil Herbert. What the heck are we supposed to make of this backfield in Chicago?
Okay, so I actually really like this for David Montgomery, because I hope that this news will negatively impact his draft status so that he falls and he becomes where I believe is more appropriate for him to be. I keep using that word, appropriate, where I believe he should be, because I feel after last year of 5 or 6 weeks of finishing as an RB1 in the top 10 or better, people were going to start reaching and overdrafting him, and then the problem was, like you said, he was the only running back in town last year, especially after Tariq Cohen got hurt. So I don't mind this because I think that actually helps fantasy managers with drafting him in the correct spot. Now, that being said, Tariq Cohen and David Montgomery have two very specific identities. So I'm not sure if adding a rookie running back to this field is really going to negatively impact them this year, because I think he may be more of that piece that's going to be with Justin Fields. So when it's Justin Fields' time to take over, he's going to have someone that he's incredibly comfortable with already in his backfield. For some reason, I don't see Herbert coming in. It's Khalil Herbert, right? Because this is how much I, love this. Yeah, Herbert. Every time I hear Herbert, I think Justin Herbert. I'm like, wait a minute, that's a quarterback. What's going on with my life? I know it's only Tuesday. Oh my gosh. But yes.
I said Trey Mitchell earlier. There's a lot of running backs we're talking about. It's getting confusing.
I know. Yes, exactly. So but when I said Khalil, I think Khalil Mack. And then when I think Herbert, I think Justin Herbert. Oh, a new class of rookies. We're going to have to get used to their names. Goodness. Okay. I still don't think that he's going to really take away significantly season long from either of these two guys, barring injury. Of course, that's always a caveat that we throw out there is barring injuries. But I don't mind that. I don't necessarily see Cohen and Montgomery as a running back by committee, like I said, because their identity is just completely different. So, for example, Montgomery's line from scrimmage back kind of identity that he has 247 rush attempts, over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. So Tariq Cohen only rushed 64 times. This was in 2019, by the way, just to kind of give you a little perspective. But he had 104 targets and 79 receptions. I mean, it's not like this is kind of muddied on who does what. It's very specific. So I like this, actually. This makes things a lot clearer for us drafting as we head into August and really start, unless you're weird like us and you start doing it now, for the normal folks out there. I don't mind this. I don't mind this at all.
Lauren, you are just knocking these questions out of the park today. As a Bears fan, I've got to agree with you yet again. And I love that you said that their roles are very, very clear cut. And I think that Tariq Cohen, we know what he's going to do. He comes in, he's kind of the James White of Chicago. He's going to come in on those passing downs and he's going to see a bunch of targets. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Tariq Cohen isn't the player that Tariq Cohen was when he got drafted. Don't get me wrong. When he got drafted, he lived up to that nickname, human joystick. He was just cutting up the field, getting away from defenders like crazy. He was a great player. And then every single year, you just see him lose a little bit of his burst. It seems like he's almost scared to turn the ball upfield now. He's a very east-west runner. You'll see him, he'll have the ball in his hand for 5 or 6 seconds, just extending this play. And then once the play is all said and done, he's only gained 2 or 3 yards on it. And
that's just very Thomas Rawls-esque.
Yes. Great comparison. So, and then Khalil Herbert getting thrown in the mix. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a tape grinder. There's a lot of guys out there that are scouts and better talent evaluators than I am. And a lot of people that I respect, reached out to me and they were like, hey, Khalil Herbert, 6th-round pick, absolutely great pick. You're going to love having him on the team. So I went and looked at some of his tape and even some of his highlights, trying to cherry pick the things that I liked about him. And I just didn't see anything that really got me excited. He was a compiler in college. He racked up a lot of yards. I believe he was 4th in the NCAA last year, either 4th or 5th in rushing yards. But when I see him, he's not especially fast. He just kind of has this natural vision where he's able to find creases and find running lanes, and he can end up turning what would be a average gain into a big gain because of that vision. But he's not somebody that I'm especially excited about. I think Damian Williams comes in, and I think that he is just another Monty. I think that he's just there to be an insurance policy in case David Montgomery goes down. So I agree with you. I was I was expecting Montgomery. I thought that his value was going to be sky high. I thought that people were going to be drafting him in the first, early 2nd round after what we saw at the end of 2021. But right now, David Montgomery is getting drafted in the 3rd round. And considering the Bears beefed up their offensive line, they brought in Justin Fields, who's going to open up some opportunities. They went out and got a few wide receivers in free agency as well that are downfield threats. I think that all of those things are going to help David Montgomery right now. And at his current ADP going in the mid to late 3rd round, I'm loving David Montgomery's value. Yeah. And I agree that all of these news stories are just pushing his value down and getting it to the point that he's actually a pretty solid value now.
I love it. Yep. Agreed. And I totally forgot to bring up the other Damian Williams when we were talking about it, but still the same concept, just like you said. I still think this is going to be the Montgomery Cohen backfield that both have their own separate identities. It's just pass catching, line from scrimmage, and go. Very clear. I like that.
Yeah. And the other thing is Montgomery showed that he is a decent pass catcher last year. So while I still think that Tariq Cohen is going to be the preferred passing down back, David Montgomery might end up carving out a bit of a role for himself in the passing game because of what we saw from him last year as well.
He had 68 targets and 54 receptions. So it wasn't like he was just dropping the ball all the time. And I believe you can add onto that 438 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So just check my notes there. But yeah.
Fantastic, yeah, and that's great production. So it would be shocking to see them. It would be shocking to see them phase him out of the passing game after what he did with the opportunity last year. But anyway, if you're watching this show, you're probably a pretty serious fantasy player. But consistently winning at fantasy football is challenging, as we all know, and it takes a lot of time. So what you need is a Footballguys premium subscription that'll give you an edge and help make winning decisions in even less time. So right now what we're doing is offering a thank you to all the serious players like yourself that are watching the show and offering an early bird discount that is available right now on our website. Just head to footballguys.com, click the orange button in the top right that says join now, and that'll take you right to the early bird discount pricing. We will do the work and you will do the winning. And Lauren, we talked about this last week. We don't have to dive deep into it again, but this is just a great service that we offer. The Footballguys premium membership is top notch, and it's a great price. Exactly. It's a no-brainer.
Do yourselves a favor and go get this, especially at this price. Absolutely.
So we got through all of the running back by committees that we were going to talk about, and now with this being a new show, I know that was exhausting, and that's not what I like talking about. Like that, as somebody who loves bell cow running backs. It is. And then, what's going to happen too is like last year, everybody was saying Saquon was as safe as you can go. Christian McCaffrey was as safe as you can go. And then it ends up being Wayne Gallman and Mike Davis. And these guys that were going undrafted in redraft leagues ended up finishing as RB1s. And it's almost assuredly going to happen again in 2021. But hey, the fun is in the speculation, and maybe we'll get some of these right.
And, exactly. And it's the fun that's in the speculation. There's nothing fun. Like if you're like hanging out with your significant other or your friend and you're like, what do you want to do today? And they're like, I don't know. It's kind of the same thing. I'm like, who do you want to draft? I don't know. It's like, blah. Let's scrape for some news.
Let's scrape for some news. Let's do it. Now, we've talked about this guy a couple times already, but his name just keeps popping up. Like there are 2 guys that you see nonstop over the last 3 weeks. And it's been Julio Jones and Aaron Rodgers. But let's talk about Julio Jones first, because Peter King said that there is a 50-50 chance that he's dealt, which is probably the most smoke that we've seen from this situation. Maybe there's a fire going. So we talked before the draft about what some good landing spots would be, but a lot of teams went out there and addressed their wide receiver positions during the draft. So what teams, now that the dust from the NFL draft has settled, what teams could you still see making a push for Julio Jones at this moment?
I still want to see the Chargers. I still want to see the Chargers have Julio Jones in there. A wonderful compliment for Justin Herbert. A wonderful compliment to Keenan Allen, especially now that Hunter Henry is gone. And Hunter Henry, I don't know how many targets he vacates. It's like 60 something. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll tweet it out later if y'all want to know. But they are 5th highest in their passing attempts last year with 627. There's plenty to go around. To still be fantasy relevant if you add Julio Jones. 93, excuse me. I knew there was a 3 in there.
That's
just switch the 6 upside down. Maybe it was just my dyslexia, but yeah, that's a lot of targets. So yeah, there's a lot to go around that he can definitely help with all across the board. That would be amazing. I would love to see him for the Chargers from a fantasy perspective. I don't really delve too much into real football when I can avoid it. So fantasy, get him to the Chargers.
That would be a blast. And I think what we talked about last time when we said, what would a good landing spot be for Julio Jones? We kind of said every team in the league, all 30 teams out there, if they added Julio Jones, they're instantly a better team. It's not like Julio Jones is going to show up anywhere and suddenly cramp their style and make them a worse team. So before the draft, I was ringing the bell for Baltimore. I wanted them to get Kenny Golladay when he was a free agent. I wanted them to go out and push for Julio Jones when he was on the trade block, and they went out and they just crushed the draft. They got Rashad Bateman and they got Tylan Wallace. So they addressed their wide receiver position. Not to mention they also went out and signed Sammy Watkins. So that team just totally revamped their wide receiver core, and I'm thrilled for them. But really, and I'm promise, I'm not trying to sound like a homer here, but the idea of Julio Jones coming to Chicago, I mean, the Bears did everything that you want to see them do when you draft a young quarterback. They beefed up their offensive line. They put Allen Robinson on the franchise tag, so he's coming back. But having another big receiver like Julio Jones to play opposite Allen Robinson would make Justin Fields' job so easy. Like, I could probably pass for 3,000 yards if I had Julio and Allen Robinson out there on the field. I mean, guys like that just make the job easy for a young quarterback. So I would love to see him come to Chicago. And, this 50-50 chance getting reported by Peter King is, like I said, the most we've heard so far. So I will be keeping close eyes on this. Yeah. And it's getting to the point now where even my friends that are Falcons fans you can see them going through that stage of grief where they're kind of getting to the acceptance already. It hasn't fully happened yet, but they're just like, if it happens, it is what it is. He had a great, career here. But it's seeming like we might see Julio get dealt, which would just be a monster move for any NFL team.
That'd be crazy. And it'd be crazy for Calvin Ridley, too. And not just for, Julio Jones. And it's going to be great for Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts.
This is so exciting all across the board. I know. I'm sorry. I love it.
So we got another update on another big name receiver. And this could just be coach speak. I mean, it's not like you want to come out and hear, hey, there's setbacks, needs to go in for another surgery. But what we heard out of Courtland Sutton's camp is that he is doing, quote, terrific in rehab. So assuming he's back for week 1, how do you see him fitting into this team with Jerry Jeudy now and a healthy Noah Fant? How do you see Courtland Sutton fitting into that pass catching core?
Please, fantasy gods, make him healthy for week 1, because Courtland Sutton is amazing. I love Courtland Sutton. So not only do I like this from the fantasy perspective of having Courtland Sutton on my team and drafting him, because hopefully people have forgotten about Courtland Sutton and he falls a little bit in the draft, one of those kind of sneaky wide receiver ones that you can pick up. But I really like what he brings to the table for Jerry Jeudy. He's going to be drawing away defenses. Same kind of idea with Noah Fant. This also helps Drew Lock if he is the starting quarterback when we're coming out for this season. So everything gets better when Courtland Sutton is on the field. And I feel like he has not had that opportunity to really shine yet in the NFL. And I want him to have that opportunity. And I think that that's going to help Drew Lock have that opportunity. And I know I'm a homer. I admit I'm a Mizzou girl. I love Drew Lock. I still think he hasn't had a true opportunity to either win that role, prove to people that he can do it, or completely miserably fail and lose it. I don't think he's done that yet. I know I'm a little biased, but him coming back, Courtland Sutton, meaning I'm excited. I hope this happens because this just means good things all around.
Yeah, and I think that you hit this one on the head as well. I think that he is not only going to be the primary pass catcher on that team if he's healthy, but it's going to make everybody else's job easier. It's going to help Noah Fant. It's going to help Jerry Jeudy. It's going to help whoever the quarterback is, possibly Aaron Rodgers, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But Courtland Sutton is, and I feel like this term gets thrown around all the time. You hear alpha wide receiver, and then people start saying, Marquise Brown is an alpha wide receiver, and DJ Chark is an alpha wide receiver. And I feel like the term gets thrown around way too often. But Courtland Sutton is just a beast. 6'4", 220 pounds. The man can go up and get a jump ball over any defensive back in the league. And people are just quick to forget. He had 1,100 yards just 2 years ago before he got hurt. And it wasn't just Drew Lock that was his quarterback that year. Joe Flacco was the main quarterback that he had in 2019. Drew Lock played a handful of games, and Brandon Allen. So this man had to play with a carousel of all. He can get it done. He can get it done. Exactly. So you better see, if Aaron Rodgers does end up going there, I think that Courtland Sutton could just as easily finish as the wide receiver 1 as Devontae Adams has in the past. He is just, it would be so much fun.
That'd be crazy.
So much fun. So let's fast forward a little bit, because I feel like we have to mention Aaron Rodgers at least once a week until this story has some sort of closure to it. So there's been rumors that, they're close to getting a deal done with the Broncos, which we have heard since draft night, and they haven't backed off of that story at all. They're still saying that the Broncos are the favorites there. But now we've got this weird news where the Packers GM said that Jordan Love has a long way to go in his development. So what is this? What is this new part of the story? Why are they out here knocking on Jordan Love now? What are you trying to make of this story?
It's kind of like when you're trying to get back together with your, like, ex, right? And you like say kind of loudly when you might be sort of in the same room, like, yeah, I really miss her. She's got pretty hair, like things like that. I feel like that's what this is. They're like, oh, we never really like expected Jordan Love to be ready to go in 2021. Like, I just dumb. This is so Days of Our Lives. Where's the popcorn? Like, what?
Yeah, this is really just turning into a soap opera over there. We didn't even talk about it last week because it came out right after we finished our show. But then there was also the thing, did you hear that in 2020, in the offseason, that there were free agents that wanted to sign with the Packers, and Aaron Rodgers was advising them against signing with the team because he said that he wasn't going to be there much longer. I mean, this whole thing has just become such a disaster. I hope that the Packers are going to be able to come out of this somehow saving face and not looking like a dumpster fire.
This is so exciting. I'm sorry. I don't like reality television. Full disclosure, a little behind the scenes peek at, stepmom Lauren here. I don't like reality TV. I don't watch The Bachelorette. I don't watch any of that stuff. I think it's trash and I don't like it. But if you like it, you do you. That's great. I watch sports. Those are my reality TV. This is reality TV. Let's go. This is awesome. So he's literally telling people last summer, like, don't come here because I'm not going to be here, just so you know. And oh my gosh, salacious.
I mean, if you want to compare this to reality, TV, March, April, May, and June is pretty much reality TV level drama because there isn't real stories. So everyone just has to drum up whatever stories they can.
Yeah. And you have the coaches like flying in stage left and they're like, so-and-so is going to be so great. And then they exit stage right and they're cut the next day. Like, it's drama. It's crazy.
It's fun. And once summer camps officially start, then it's, a little bit less drama. And then we start actually having like real clarity on the situation. There's always those random stories though, like Olin Kreutz punching somebody in the mouth and breaking his jaw, or fights breaking out at camp. But for the most part, the drama calms down once summer camp starts. So
tell that to Michael Thomas because he did not slow his drama down last year. And that caused me drama. Let's go.
And I'm sure in a month or two, you and I will have plenty of holdout scares to discuss because that's what starts popping up soon. Who are going to be the guys this year? Who's not going to want to play until they get a new contract?
That is so
Keep tuning in every week because we'll be talking about it soon enough. So let's talk about another veteran here. Dave Zangaro reported that there is a very good chance that Zach Ertz is not with the Eagles in 2021. So which teams should be going out and trying to acquire this veteran tight end?
Well, there's the obvious one, I think, that I will let you take. But there's another one here where I feel like I'm suddenly a Chargers fan now. But, like, I would love to see him with the Chargers. Like you said, Hunter Henry is vacating 93 targets. Which, why didn't I remember that when I put that in my notes yesterday? Who knows? I don't even, things happen. But, yeah, that's, like, perfect. He knows what he's doing. He's a veteran. He is highly prolific that sounds terrible. Productive, I should say. Him with the Chargers for fantasy purposes would be freaking awesome with Justin Herbert. But I think yours is probably the best out of all of the landing spots for Zach Ertz. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, let's be honest. We've got to assume that he's going to the Colts. Him and Carson Wentz, they have that connection. Carson Wentz loves his tight ends. Right now, I was looking at the Colts tight end situation, and they have all these guys that are on expiring contracts that they haven't brought back. Jack Doyle, Trey Burton, all of these guys that would make sense. And I feel like the reason they aren't bringing these guys back is because they're waiting to get a deal done for Zach Ertz. It just makes too much sense. And it hurts my heart because Mo Alley Cox, love that guy. First of all, such a great name, Gigantor. I mean, the guy's a beast. Like, he looks like he could just, play any sport and be elite at it. So I really wanted to see him carve out a role. But yeah, I think that Zach Ertz going to the Colts just makes too much sense. I feel like that's the layup, but I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, me too. And he's gonna be immediately fantasy relevant also, which is very exciting. I think let's go.
Yeah, and I mean, he's still only 30 years old. Like, in my head, for some reason, Zach Ertz is like 38, 39 years old. 30 years old for a tight end really isn't that old. Like, that, he's younger than I am. It blows my mind. But, I think going to the Colts just makes too much sense. Now, let's stay on the Colts for a second. we're fantasy football people, so we usually don't talk about defense and offensive lines too much. But the Colts just made a very splashy signing. Eric Fisher, who is a former first overall pick, not a first round pick, the first overall pick of the draft, was let go by the Kansas City Chiefs and re-signed with the Colts. So we already know that the Colts, like that's what they're known for. Their MO is having an elite offensive line. And then they just went out and added the best available offensive lineman to an elite offensive line. So does this move the needle for anybody on the Colts for you at all?
I mean, it does. It's going to help everybody. That includes Carson Wentz, Jonathan Taylor, any receivers that are there, Zach Ertz if he's there. It doesn't hurt anything. It only helps. So, not in addition, I think Pro Football Focus had them as like 7th best offensive line or something. I would argue that they're even better than that. But now they're even better than that. I mean, this is good all around. Not only for real football, but for health and safety, for the run game, for the passing game, and for fantasy. This is gonna be great. It's a good move, Colts. Watch out.
Yeah, the Colts are doing it right. I mean, they're just building a great team over there, and that's another running back by committee that we didn't even talk about. I mean,
Frank Reich too. It's come on. Mm-hmm. It's this is just he wants to make sure that his relationship with Carson Wentz can flourish once again, like it did back in the heyday. And this is another reason why bringing Zach Ertz makes so much sense. This is another reason why they brought to bring another piece of protection. And I just totally interrupted you and took over that whole thing, but I was excited.
No, that's totally fine. I'm excited too. And what I was going to get at, I know that what this is going to happen is this is just going to make everybody go goo goo gaga over Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor, it won't surprise me come August, September, if Jonathan Taylor is going as the 3rd or 4th overall pick off the board, because that hype train is flying downhill right now.
Full steam ahead.
Sparks shooting off of this train. I mean, it's just, there is nothing stopping that hype train right now. And that's a little bit more of a running back by committee than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. Jordan Wilkins is still there. Nyheim Hines is still there.
Yeah.
Marlon Mack is coming back from an injury. There's a lot of.
Did they? Okay, so I'm out of the touch on this one. Out of the loop. I do that a lot. Everybody, I combine phrases. It happens all the time. So just bear with me. Did they re-sign Marlon Mack?
Yes, he is coming back. Okay. He's coming off an Achilles injury, which is not an easy injury to come back from. But I feel like when it comes to injuries and recoveries from injuries, over the last 5 years, like I don't even try to think about injuries that much anymore, because just 10 years ago, an ACL injury was a career ender. And then Adrian Peterson just bucked that trend, came back in less than a year and almost won MVP. I mean, like he had one of his best seasons coming off an injury. We see Saquon Barkley coming back next year, and he's still going as a 2nd, 3rd overall pick in fantasy, because you just kind of expect people to recover now at a different level than they did previously. And I feel like Achilles still kind of has that taboo to it where they say people can't bounce back from an Achilles injury. But, given how far Marlon Mack is dropping right now and what we saw from him 2 years ago, Marlon Mack's somebody that I'm still totally happy taking in the 13th, 14th, 15th round of my redraft leagues.
Me too.
And Jonathan Taylor, I think that he's a great guy, and he's an extremely impressive player. But I worry about his share of carries on that offense.
Yeah, when Marlon Mack got hurt, it took him several weeks before he was able to really become productive with that. I don't want to say lead back role, because like you said, there are some other pieces that are there as well. But it took him a little while to gain some steam there. So I agree with you. But I like Marlon Mack. The value is unbelievable.
Yeah. Now let's wrap up on the story that took the internet by storm yesterday. I can't believe we're even talking about this. This is a fantasy show.
Just real quick,
he's not going to have any fantasy.
We have to.
I know.
Just really
I feel
quickly.
Like the audience would be furious if we didn't talk about the
fact
I know. It is TEBOW time all over again in Jacksonville. Tim Tebow back in the league. But really, I mean, is this something that you should pay attention to? Should everyone be like scrambling to update their rankings and move Tim Tebow into their low-end tight end 1 position now? What do we make of this? Is Tim Tebow a real thing, or is this just a publicity stunt?
He's going to be so annoyingly relevant sometimes. You know what I mean? There's no humanly possible way that he can't if he makes the team, is what I mean, because it's not guaranteed for him to make the team. But I live in Florida. So you can imagine it's all over the news, and no one's talking about Trevor Lawrence. They're all talking about Tim Tebow. So here's the thing. I don't know if this is good or bad for Trevor Lawrence. It's bad if he really wants the spotlight and he really wants to be like, look at me, look at me. He doesn't seem like that kind of a player. So this actually may be pretty good for Trevor Lawrence because all the heat is off him and everyone's going to be focusing on Tim Tebow. And he's just going to be over here like, quietly QB1, what's going on? So this is interesting. This is very interesting. Who's really going to love this or like the mid, maybe even early 30s, late 30s ladies are suddenly going to be like, I want to go watch a football game. And their husbands are going to be like, let's go. That's, I think, going to be the biggest impacts of Tim Tebow. And I might be one of them. I love Tim Tebow so much. But yeah, for fantasy, he's going to be annoying, like Jason Witten level annoying, maybe even worse than that. I don't know. I don't see it being like, let's adjust our rankings because who knows with the tight end landscape being the way it is, maybe he'll finish as like the tight end 8. Who knows? Nate Burleson of Good Morning. Yeah. It's crazy.
Sorry, what were you saying about Nate Burleson? I love Nate Burleson. So whatever you got to say about him.
I love Nate Burleson too. I love him so much. But he said on Good Morning Football this morning that if he makes the team, he believes that Tim Tebow can have 5 touchdowns.
And I mean, really, that's pretty much the barometer.
That's more than Dallas Goedert.
Tight end 1. Yeah,
and no
you get 5 touchdowns, you're pretty much locked in as the tight end, like 12 to 15. But I don't think that he's going to make the team. I think that this, like I started off with, is just kind of a publicity stunt more than anything. First of all, they're going to sell a ton of jerseys. Everyone's going to be going out, Tebow back in his hometown. But, obviously Urban Meyer was also his coach in college. So I think that what this does is it takes a lot of the spotlight off a first-year head coach, a number 1 overall pick, and I think it just kind of turns the spotlight towards Tim Tebow a little bit, which I think is a smart move on the Jags. But I don't think that he's going to make the final roster. I said something yesterday on Twitter, and I got absolutely shredded for saying this. It was very misconstrued. But I said, I pointed that out, that Urban Meyer was Tim Tebow's coach in college and that they have a rapport. And I said that he was there to help with Trevor Lawrence's development. And what I meant was, help with his maturation, help with him learning what it's like. If you think about it, there are only, 120-something people in the world that knows what it's like to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft and become an NFL quarterback. That's something that nobody else can possibly relate to besides, 100 or so people. Tim Tebow's one of those people. So I think that he's there, just kind of as a bridge to Urban Meyer to help out with a little bit. But what everybody, of course, the way that Twitter construed this was that Tebow was going to go in there and help Trevor Lawrence learn how to throw the ball. Full disclosure, that is not what I meant. I didn't mean anything close to that. What I meant is that he'd be there as some sort of mentor guidance role. That's what I expect. But I will be shocked, absolutely shocked, if Tim Tebow makes the week 1 roster.
See, I don't know though, because if that were the only role that Tim Tebow was going to fulfill, why didn't they just hire him as like some kind of coaching assistant? You know what I mean? Like, he's coming back as a player. And by the way, I have always said that he should be a tight end. Have you seen the way that man is built? Come on.
Yeah, and people that he played against in college said that he was the hardest hitter that they've ever seen. That when you drop his shoulder, there was nothing you can do about it.
I'm rooting for him. Like, let's go, Tim Tebow. Why not?
But let's just say, if this was a publicity stunt for the Jacksonville Jaguars, props to them, because here we are just feeding right into it and closing the show on the Tim Tebow talk.
I don't know if he would be okay with it being a publicity stunt. I think he genuinely wants to prove that he is an athlete. And if he makes the team, he makes the team. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Whatever. I mean, I don't know if this is, like I said, they could have made a bigger deal out of it if he was. I don't know. It's drama. See, it's drama.
Yeah, like I said, and it's a moneymaker. They will sell a lot of jerseys in Jacksonville. Well, that's all we've got for the show today, but how we wrap up every single episode, and we've done this for the last 2 episodes, and we're going to continue doing this, is with our Footballguys Spotlight. It's something that I love to do. Anyone that knows me and anyone that knows Lauren knows that we are all about trying to build people up in this space, especially newcomers. And what we're going to do today is highlight a friend of mine, Andrew Metcalf. He is a dynasty writer for Real Deal Fantasy, and he also is a contributor for Club Fantasy FFL. You can find him on Twitter at DrewMet_FF. And Drew is just a guy who, if you want to engage with somebody on Twitter, that will always be there to comment and help you work through questions that you have, whether it be start, sit, trade questions, whatever. he is phenomenal when it comes to engaging with his audience, engaging with his viewers, and making everybody feel like their time is valuable. So he's somebody that I would absolutely recommend going out, smashing the follow button right now at DrewMet_FF. Well, that's all we've got today. So thank you so much for tuning into yet another episode of our newest show, 2 Point Stance. You can find us every Tuesday afternoon, 12 noon Eastern. We will be streaming to you from Twitter, and then you can find it at 7 p.m. at youtube.com/footballguytv. Hey, before we sign off, is there anything else that you wanted to hit on here?
No, I'm excited for football. That is what I want to hit on. I cannot wait for this season to roll around. But I'm also excited for next week too. Want to know why? Because we get to do another show on Tuesday. It makes me happy because I get to talk about football and I get to hang out with you. It's a good day.
And schedule releases. We get that tomorrow. So next week we will have a full release of schedules to discuss. Tons of hard-hitting comment coming at you again. So we will see you next Tuesday. Thanks a lot for tuning in.